Okay, everyone, we need some new ideas of where we should take the Spider-Man comics. Anyone? Anyone at all? Well, maybe we could give the fans what they've been begging for like almost a decade now. Like bring back Peter and Mary Jane's marriage. Finally make Spider-Man happy again. I know. How about this time we add another Spider-Person to the books, but he's a boy that was secretly Spider-Man's kid sidekick that we've all forgotten.
He's so inspirational.
Why haven't we thought of this before? You have. Shut up, nerd. And, okay, hear me out. What a better way to win the fans over? By having Dan Slott write the book. Like, the guy that all Spider-Man fans love and respect? You crazy son of a bitch, you're a genius.
Oh my god, he's a genius. How did we think of that on the phone? I wish I could have been like him. How do we never thought just needs promotion?
So this is what J. Michael Straczynski would have felt like.
Hey, welcome back to the stash. Now you might be sitting there asking yourself, what's one thing that Spider-Man just doesn't need? And let me tell you, there are many simple answers, but the one that is pretty well known is simply that Spider-Man does not need a sidekick. The entire concept of Spidey having a genuine sidekick was not even in the cards until way later when the books were already in the gutter, thanks to the infamous One More Day crew. Now recently there's been attempts at him having a partner which is different from a sidekick, but even with that minor difference, it still feels very wrong. To me, and I'm sure many other Spidey fans who actually read the books, he's clearly at his best working solo. However, the occasional team up is always welcome too. That's as far as it should ever go. Even when he joined the Avengers, it still felt very odd. The stories were okay and it was cool seeing him in that, entire environment, but it made the Spidey title feel more like an Avengers book as opposed to what it was meant to be. Obviously now Marvel is trying their hardest to normalize Peter and Miles coexisting within the same world and being partners, which again, a very recent concept. It's gotten to the point where everywhere you look there just seems to be a brand new shiny Spider-Person for Peter to interact with. Seriously, it's like they're pumped out of a factory.
Where's the love?
I miss when the comics were just quite literally Peter Parker, and even if I had to pick, a different Spider-Person besides Peter and maybe Ben, even Miguel O'Hara was just fine enough on his own. I always found Spider-Man 29 the only interesting Spider-Person who isn't Peter Parker, simply because there was an effort put into his books. It's not like how Miles would stop every 5 seconds to say, gee, I sure wonder what Peter would do. Miguel was a genuine arsehole and the complete opposite of Peter set way into the future. He was way more cool than the other variants we've gotten over the years, and him being in the year 2099 doesn't disrespect Peter and his own time, and leaves the world feeling properly balanced. Now it's just so cluttered, and when they announced that Spider-Boy of all people was going to get his first ever series, I just felt so deflated. I thought to myself, so Marvel is going to waste even more resources trying to pump out yet another lame Spider-Man variant, instead of fixing the main book? Again? So join us today as we take a look at Dan Slott's new addition to the Marvel Universe, Bailey Briggs, the Spider-Boy. But before we get into that, I just wanted to quickly let you all know that we are trying to reach 3,000 subscribers before the end of next month. I know it's a big ask, but with your help, I know we can do it. So if you're new around here and like Spidey or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. But anyway, with all that being said, let's get straight back into the video. Now, I'm not sure why, but Dan Slott has this weird obsession with trying to give Spider-Man a kid sidekick. In fact, he's already tried this and failed horribly with a character named Alpha. Picture this. It's Spider-Man's big 50 years anniversary issue. Dan Slott is lucky enough to be given the privilege of writing what could be one of the Spider-Man's most special stories ever. And so what does he do? Use it to introduce an annoying kid who becomes insanely overpowered and forgotten within like the next year. Luckily, Alpha completely failed, and I'm pretty sure we actually haven't seen him in years, save for one odd She-Hulk comic. We all thought that that was the end of these annoying attempts for Spider-Man to have a partner or a sidekick, but boy were we wrong! Through the use of multiverse bullshit, we're introduced to this new character called Spider-Boy, the forgotten sidekick of the Amazing Spider-Man. Because that's all Dan Slott and Marvel seems to know how to do right now, rewrite canon and multiverse nonsense.
Still to be happy about.
You're up too old.
Job's not finished. Job finished?
I don't think so.
I decided to torture myself and read all 9 issues of Spider-Boy, and man, I sure have a lot to say about this. To start off, I found this entire series mostly embarrassing. It's like Marvel has suddenly shifted to how DC were in the 60s. In fact, I could have sworn Stan Lee used to make fun of DC for having so many derivative characters like Aqualad, Kid Flash, Wonder Girl, and that whole group, yet now Marvel has a derivative of nearly every single character. And listen, I get it, they want to appeal to the younger audience, but there are better ways to do it without tarnishing Spider-Man along the way. I also find it crazy how Bailey Briggs has his own series, but not Ben Reilly or Kane. It's like Marvel purposely tries to piss off the Spider-Man fans. Those are 2 characters who have been in the books for decades and are in dire need of some attention, but no, instead of taking the time to, fix Ben and focus on his story, all we get is him being a minor member of the cast whose story occasionally progresses from time to time. Dan Slott also has this weird obsession with writing Robbie Robertson to just be this massive dick. Literally, for like almost a decade, the only thing he made Robbie do was show up every few years to stab his friends in the back with some fake news or fire his employees for questionable reasons. And looking at issue 1, I see that he continues to use him for the exact same thing. It's a real shame, because for me at least, when he's written properly, Robbie is one of my favourite members of the Daily Bugle staff. But for so many years now, he's just been so out of character. It seems like the only thing Dan actually cares about is how many more Spider people he can add into the Spider-Man mythos. Did we actually need Spider-Boyd? Of course not. That's his biggest offense as a character, just like all the other new Spider variants. We don't actually need them. Well, that and them being all lazy corporate creations, which just ruined Spider-Man. But anyway, hell, if Marvel and Dan are so desperate to give Peter a sidekick, wouldn't it just make more sense to focus on him and Miles since you shoehorned him into the 616? Now, I'm not saying it's a good idea, by the way, I think all of this sucks. It's just a bad idea that would have made more sense than what we actually got. The entire first story was just a retread from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Modern writers are just so bad, and we're at the point where they only know how to just copy other people's work. Zeb Wells does it in spades in ASM, and Dan is no different here. In this issue, you got Spider-Boy stuck in a cage, overrun by a high evolutionary-like villain, and his friend is also a victim to the madness, and in a way is sacrificed because of the main character's blunder. Then the same villain trying to track him down after he somehow escapes, and him being the only one to escape. Slott isn't even trying anymore, he's just too busy blocking people on Twitter. In fact, I found the entire first arc just so painfully bad, yet I see so many high reviews for it. During the whole thing, we just see Bailey make friends with Squirrel Girl, Thor, Spider-Man, Miles, and Captain America. And I just hate the fact that they went with that introduce him to all the popular characters and make them accept him, then the audience will have no choice route, because it comes off as lazy and desperate. If your character is good and interesting, you shouldn't have to remind us every single issue that he is. At the very least, it was a part of the overall story, but I'll get into that later. The best way I can sum up the first 7 issues is Madam M needs Spider-Boy to try to perfect her experiments and to fix her husband. Along the way, she ends up capturing Bailey, but with the power of friendship, he manages to defeat her. Sort of, the High Evolutionary just kinda steals her away. There were so many moments in these comics that just either made me feel really annoyed or feel really confused. Like for an example, in issue 2, Bailey's phone, which has the only photos of him and his mum left, gets stolen and him and Christina chase after the thief, but he stops because he needs to go save someone. Keep in mind, 1, he has spider powers and this is a normal guy. 2, he's holding on to something that he could easily throw at him to quickly take his phone back. 3, the guy isn't even making a good escape, he's still in the kitchen as Bailey's running out. And 4, during the time it took Bailey to stop, mope around, run out and complain about being Spider-Boy, you and Christina could have easily stopped the guy and got the phone back. That is apparently so important to you.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Issue 3 only gets worse with the addition of Killionaire. He's just this annoying little who's an influencer. If it wasn't bad enough for Dan being responsible for Speedball, he's only gone and outdone himself with this monstrosity. Basically, Taskmaster last issue stole a piece of the Super Adaptoid for the Brat, which got turned into a mini toy version of the Adaptoid, which he filmed so he can showcase it wreaking havoc in the streets of New York. He even wrote this freak to have the attention span of someone who uses TikTok every day. Can this get any worse? I just had to ask, didn't I? Jesus, this issue just felt like a bad Despicable Me parody. Oh yeah! And unfortunately for us, issue 4 doesn't get all that much better. Why is Aunt May in this book but hasn't been seen in The Amazing Spider-Man in forever? And what's with Dan Slott trying to fit as many old unfunny memes as possible with them watching a movie called Fast Car Family 5? Get it, guys? It's a funny bald man who says the funny family meme.
There's always room for family. You don't turn your back on family. I told you never threaten a man's family.
In this story, Miles and Peter tell Bailey to piss off and leave the fight into the pros, which results in him getting all upset and distancing himself from Peter. Wow, Peter, Miles, and Bailey all in one issue. We really have hit rock bottom. Anyway, later on, the mysterious human spider who's causing trouble in the streets and being a public pest catches the attention of the Daily Bugle and Spider-Man and Miles Morales. When Pete confronts Bailey about it, he pleads his innocence, but Peter only makes things worse by trying to catch him out on a lie. Spider-Man, of all people, should just know that sometimes it's possible to be framed for a crime you did not commit. Hell, he's been through this shit countless of times with his clones and the Chameleon alone. But here, Dan writes him to be such a jerk to Bailey to the point where he doesn't even sound like Spider-Man anymore. He knows how to handle kids, he was a teacher, yet here he's a stubborn moron. Miles later finds the human spider and they're convinced it's Bailey until he himself comes in to defend it. We later find out that Madame Monstrosity made this creature, and in a way it's like Bailey's brother. It's mostly because she used the parts of the spider that were not spliced into the boy and the parts of the boy that weren't spliced into the spider. Coming up next, issue 5 was a pretty standard issue. Bailey's old friend that got experimented on with the idea created from his joke about rhinos and elephants is rampaging through the streets of New York and ends up capturing Spider-Boy and Christina. But I just hate how Slott and so many other writers make it so the kid with no powers is not afraid of a giant monster that could just easily kill them with a simple slap. Christina actively follows the fight, so Spider-Boy won't leave her again. You're telling me that throughout the whole thing she wouldn't even feel a hint of fear or show any of it? It's just like Black Adam. Don't even get me started on that annoying ass kid.
Yes, but not to me. Say it to the bad guys. But before you zap them.
Catchphrase, then kill.
Yes.
Also in this issue, we find out that the High Evolutionary, in short, just told Madame M that her experiments suck and that she's a phony, which was probably the best part of this series. It's like literally why she hates Spider-Boy in the first place, because she couldn't remember who he was. Well, that and him being the only person to escape. Now, issue 6 was pretty harmless. Christina gets merged with a pigeon and is forced to do hard labor for Madame M. They're meant to have the powers of the animal, yet she can't even fly to escape, which is just pretty lame to me. All she can really do is just talk to other pigeons, so she just sends a message to the heroes back in New York. Or as, Dan Slott later jokes, she sends a tweet. Get it? Isn't he so funny? Anyway, we also discover that Madame M's handmaid is in fact Bailey's mother, but we'll get into that as well later. Now, issue 7 only gets worse. Since this is a modern Spidey book, we've got to, of course, be reminded that Peter is a mopey moron who's the cause of every problem. So within the first panel, we see him blame himself for what happened to Christina and Spider-Boy, considering he trusted a kid to find a monster. Why on earth a man with such high sense of responsibility would allow that to happen is beyond me, but whatever. He gets the pigeon message and gathers the worst Avengers lineup you'll ever see to take down Madame M and her farm full of her experiments. Having Thor on your team is such overkill, and Dan clearly knew that since he wrote all of them to be such idiots during the fight scene. The God of Thunder alone would be able to take down Madame M and all of her henchmen animals within, a second. Yet here with a team of him, Spider-Man, Miles, Squirrel Girl, Captain America, and that stupid toy soldier who possesses pretty much the power of every single superhero, including Silver Surfer, can barely handle all of these human-animal hybrids, and allows, Madame M to escape into her lab because not one of them decided maybe we should stop the person behind this. Hell, Spider-Man could have just at least webbed her to the wall instead of doing, nothing? God, I'm so sick of new writers making all of the characters just so stupid to fit their shitty story. But anyway, Madame M infuses herself with every animal ever and becomes Dan Slott's dream girl. Unfortunately for her, Spider-Boy has the power of friendship on his side, and of course she loses the fight. Well, by losing the fight, I mean the High Evolutionary just sort of bails her out and is now going to be doing a whole bunch of experiments on her, but whatever. The entire ending was so rushed, and even the whole big climax just felt completely forced with all things considered. Hell, the whole story could have just been avoided if Peter wasn't so out of character the entire time. Plus, his mum is such an asshole. I get that she can't remember Bailey, but she treats him like shit in favor of that freak clone. But since then, they've released 2 more issues. Issue 8 is just basically a poor man's version of the Riddler from the Batman animated series, mixed with Doodlebob vs. Spider-Boy. Puzzle Man's word game app gets removed from the Daily Bugle's website due to it having issues. Robbie mentions that when it's debugged, they'll allow it back, but for now it just has to stay off, which is very reasonable. So Puzzle Man does what anyone would normally do and blame it on Spider-Boy, and sets up a big revenge plan for him, instead of, fixing it. The main complication of this issue is that Bailey wants to show his mum the portrait of them together as a way of proof that he really is her son, but the Puzzle Man steals it and threatens to erase a part of it each time Spider-Boy doesn't play along with his games. This is now twice he's had the photos of his mum stolen, but anyway, the Puzzle Man accidentally erases way more than he meant to, and in a fit of rage Bailey breaks his pencil. Him now not being able to show his mum the photo is just basically his breaking point. He goes to Madam Web, Silk, and that other one, I forget their names, and says that this is all your fault and now you're gonna fix everything. To be honest, this issue just really pissed me off. I hate that Dan Slott thinks the way to keep most stories interesting is to ask himself what would be the worst thing that could happen to my character, and make it happen and have them deal with it. Inserting this shitty wannabe Riddler purely to f*** a child reunited with his mother got me so annoyed and I don't even care for Bailey. Now finally for the last issue, issue 9. All this one really does is just show how useless these 3 Spider-Women are. Obviously it's their fault in the first place all of this happened since one of them messed up the spell to bring Bailey back, which caused everyone to forget who he is. This issue is just no different. As she performs the spell to fix everything, Bailey gets sent into the Japanese Spider-Man's world, and after he's done there he gets trapped within the Spider-Verse. I don't really get what's the point of these 3 morons. Like seriously, at the start they were busy trying to help this Spider Duck, and Madam Web makes this big deal how she knows everything and that's her thing, And then Spider-Boy on his own discovers that Spider Duck is actually just Howard the Duck, just trying to get some free food, which sets up this horrible shot. How can you have Madam Web gloat about how she knows everything, and then have her not realize it was Howard the fucking Duck the whole time? The real kick in the gut, however, is the first 3 pages, which shows Spider-Man making yet another deal with someone in all red that will cost him something dear to both Spider-Man and Peter Parker, because he clearly hasn't learned from his first time not to do that shit. Are we so tapped for ideas now with Spider-Man books that we're just resorting to another one more day scenario? This whole scene, in fact, is just modern Spider-Man in a nutshell. Slott tries to imply that Spidey shouldn't have called himself Spider-Man and instead have been Spider-Boy or something like that, and that he should have been a sidekick instead of his own hero? Like, why? Spidey also continues to further put himself down. Also, he can talk about how amazing Bailey is, which has become the norm within this title. My god, Slott can't even follow the narrative thread of what he himself wrote less than a year ago. Spider-Man never said that to Spider-Boy. That Spider-Boy dialogue about Spider-Man not needing a sidekick appeared in Spider-Man 2022 issue 11, and what Spider-Man had told him was, "We could find a cure. That's all I want for you, Bailey. I don't need a sidekick." Which had absolutely nothing to do with the Spider-Man was full of a dialogue that Slott delivers in this issue.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Overall, this entire story is just such a mess, and Dan Slott just continues to show why he's one of the worst Spider-Man writers in history. I didn't even go into how this book, just like the Spectacular Spider-Man comic, doesn't follow any sort of continuity with the ASM title. None of this fits in with the other books, and the same for them. It's just really sad to see just how little Marvel cares anymore about things like that, because it used to be a staple within their ongoing series. And I can't forget to mention, the covers were just as bad as the storytelling, with Humberto Ramos still somehow finding jobs within Marvel. These covers are so hideous, I mean just look at them. Spider-Boy is just another pathetic addition to the Marvel world, and it just feels like at this point the only thing they actually know how to do is just pump these freaks out. It all just feels so hollow and forced. I really do miss when it was just Peter Parker back then. Back when it actually meant something to be Spider-Man. Now that title per se is just so polluted to the point where it'll just never shine again unless something big like a massive reboot happens. I went into this series with low expectations and expecting just sort of a fun kids book, and still at that I was just mildly disappointed with the way that Dan Slott wrote it. As an addition to the Spider-Man mythos, it is pathetic and an embarrassment, but even as a kids book, it's just not that entertaining nor fun. And in all honesty, I just find it really depressing how this is the current state of Spider-Man books, and it has been for so long. But that is it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, because here, any support means so much. I'd love to hear what you think of Spider-Boy down below in the comment section. We can start a conversation. Be sure to tune in next time. Same with time, same with channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and see you in the next one.